I've worked as a bartender for over a decade, and I've seen all kinds of people come through my bar. Some friendly, some troubled, and some downright strange. But none of them left me with the same lingering dread as the man I'm about to tell you about. This story still haunts me to this day, and after you hear it, you'll understand why. The bar I worked at wasn't anything special, just a small, quiet place in a sleepy town. It was the kind of spot where locals gathered to drink after a long day, share stories, and unwind. Thursday nights were typically slow, and I usually spent more time cleaning glasses than serving drinks. That all changed when he started coming in. It was a cold Thursday evening when I first noticed him. He walked in just after 9 p.m., right as I was wiping down the counter. The first thing that struck me was his stillness. He moved with a deliberate, measured pace, as if he had all the time in the world. He didn't look around or acknowledge anyone. He walked straight to the darkest corner of the bar and sat down. When I went over to take his order, he spoke in a low, almost mechanical voice. "Whiskey, neat," was all he said. His eyes never met mine, and I remember feeling an inexplicable chill as I poured his drink. He had an unsettling aura, the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. For the next several weeks, he came in every Thursday night without fail. Same time, same order, same dark corner. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't look at anyone. He just sat there, sipping his drink slowly, watching the bar in silence. His eyes, though, they were the worst part. Dark, cold, and predatory. They seemed to follow people, tracking them like prey. At first, I chalked it up to eccentricity. Maybe he was just an introvert, someone who preferred to be left alone. But then, strange things started happening. The first incident was subtle. One of our regulars, a friendly guy named Tom, mentioned that he felt uneasy when sitting near the stranger. "It's like he's staring right through you," Tom said with a nervous laugh. "Gives me the creeps." I dismissed it at the time, thinking Tom had just had one too many drinks. Then Tom disappeared. He left the bar one Thursday night and no one saw him again. His car was found abandoned a few miles outside of town, but there was no sign of him. The police investigated, but the trail went cold. It was a tragedy, but in a small town like ours, people vanish for all kinds of reasons. Life moved on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, especially when another regular, a young woman named Lisa, went missing 2 weeks later. She had been sitting in the same area as Tom, right near the stranger. The last time I saw her, she was laughing with friends, completely unaware that it would be her final night at the bar. That's when I started noticing the carvings. Beneath the tables near where the stranger sat, there were strange symbols etched into the wood. They weren't anything I recognized. Jagged, almost ritualistic markings that seemed out of place in a bar. I found them under 3 different tables, all in the vicinity of where he always sat. My curiosity turned into obsession. I began researching the symbols, spending late nights poring over books on folklore and the occult. What I found made my blood run cold. The symbols were linked to ancient rituals of binding and sacrifice. Dark practices meant to trap souls and offer them to something. The specifics were murky, but the implications were horrifying. The more I learned, the more I felt the walls closing in around me. I started watching the stranger more closely, noting every movement, every glance. His presence seemed to darken the room, a cold, oppressive weight that grew heavier each time he appeared. I decided to follow him. It was a reckless decision, I know that now, but my fear had given way to a desperate need for answers. One Thursday night, after the last customer had left and the lights were dimmed, I trailed him as he left the bar. He walked with that same deliberate pace, never looking back, never straying from his path. He led me through the quiet streets of our town, past darkened houses and empty alleys. The air grew colder, and a thick fog rolled in, shrouding everything in a ghostly haze. Finally, he stopped in front of an old, decrepit house at the edge of town. The place was a ruin, windows boarded up, the roof sagging with age. He slipped inside without a sound, the door creaking shut behind him. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run as far away as I could. But I had come too far to stop now. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open, stepping into darkness. The air inside was heavy with a sickly sweet smell, like decaying flowers mixed with rot. I crept forward, my footsteps muffled by the dust-covered floor. The house was empty. Or so it seemed. In the center of the main room was a large wooden table covered in yellowed papers and more of those strange symbols. Candles burned at the corners, their flames casting flickering shadows that seemed to dance and writhe. And then I saw the photographs. Dozens of them scattered across the table, faces I recognized, Tom, Lisa, and others, all patrons who had sat near the stranger, all missing. Their eyes were scratched out, their smiles twisted into expressions of terror. I felt a presence behind me, cold breath on my neck. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, but I could feel him, watching, waiting. A sudden noise, a low guttural whisper, sent me stumbling back. I knocked over a candle, and the flame caught on the papers. Fire spread quickly, devouring the photographs and symbols. Smoke filled the room as I ran, heart racing, lungs burning. I didn't look back until I was outside, gasping for air. The house was engulfed in flames, the fire crackling and roaring like a living thing. The police called it an accident. They never found any bodies. The stranger never returned to the bar. I quit my job soon after. I moved far away, hoping to leave the nightmare behind me. But some nights, when the wind howls and shadows stretch long, I feel his eyes on me, and I know he's still out there. There's a certain thrill to going out to a late-night bar with friends. The music, the dim lights, and the haze of alcohol create a sense of carefree fun that makes you feel invincible. But sometimes, that sense of security is nothing more than an illusion. The story I'm about to share isn't just a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that not everything you see can be trusted. It happened to a group of 5 college friends. For privacy, let's call them Jake, Sarah, Chris, Megan, and Ethan. They were close knit, always going out together to celebrate birthdays, good grades, or just to unwind after exams. One Friday night, they decided to visit a dive bar near their campus. It was a popular spot known for its cheap drinks and late closing hours. The bar had a reputation for getting a bit rowdy, but that night, it seemed eerily quiet. The friends arrived just before midnight. The bar was dimly lit, the music low, and a faint smell of stale beer hung in the air. They claimed a booth near the back, ordered a round of drinks, and settled in for a night of fun. But it didn't take long before they noticed something off. A man was sitting alone at the bar, facing them. He didn't drink, didn't speak to anyone. He just sat there, motionless, with his eyes fixed on their table. His stare was unrelenting, and what made it worse was that he didn't blink. Jake was the first to point it out. "Check out that guy," he whispered, tilting his head toward the bar. "He hasn't moved in like 10 minutes. Sarah laughed nervously. "Maybe he's just drunk." "No," Jake said, narrowing his eyes. "He hasn't even touched his drink." Chris glanced over his shoulder and shuddered. "Creepy. Let's just ignore him." They tried to shake it off and went back to their drinks. But the man's presence was impossible to ignore. Every time one of them glanced toward the bar, he was still there, staring with those dark, unblinking eyes. As the night wore on, the tension grew. Megan suggested they leave, but the others didn't want to cut the night short because of one weird guy. They decided to stay until last call. When the bar finally closed, the man was still sitting in the same spot. He watched them as they gathered their things and headed out. Jake made a joke about him being a statue, but no one laughed. The walk home was uneventful at first. They split up as they reached their apartments, each of them eager to shake off the night's weirdness and get some sleep. That's when the phone calls started. Jake was the first to experience it. His phone rang just after 3 a.m. When he answered, there was nothing but static and the sound of heavy breathing. He hung up, assuming it was a prank. But the calls kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. Then Sarah found a message written on her bathroom mirror. The words "I saw you" were scrawled in lipstick. She lived alone and was certain she hadn't written it. Chris's experience was even worse. He woke up to find his front door wide open. He distinctly remembered locking it before going to bed. On the floor just inside his apartment was a single key, a key that didn't belong to him. The friends began sharing their experiences, piecing together the strange events. At first, they laughed it off as a series of bizarre coincidences, but as the days passed, the occurrences grew more sinister. Ethan woke up one night to the sound of footsteps in his living room. His heart raced as he grabbed a baseball bat and crept toward the noise, but when he flipped on the lights, the room was empty. The only sign that something, or someone, had been there was a single message written on the wall in red marker. "Don't look back." They were being hunted. None of them could deny it anymore. The stalker wasn't just watching them, he was in their homes. Desperation drove them to investigate. Sarah suggested they research the bar's history, hoping to find some clue about their tormentor. What they uncovered was a chilling pattern. The bar had a dark reputation that stretched back decades. Several patrons had disappeared after visiting, all under mysterious circumstances. Some were never seen again, while others were found dead under strange and unexplained conditions. One name kept coming up in their research, a man known only as the Watcher. He was said to have an obsession with observing people, silently following them until they were driven mad with paranoia. But the most terrifying discovery was a police report from years earlier. It detailed the disappearance of a young man who had claimed that someone at the bar was watching him. He had described the same unblinking stare, the same eerie stillness. His final words before vanishing, "It's in the drink." Panic gripped the group. Had their drinks been tampered with? Was that how the stalker was controlling them? They couldn't be sure, but they knew one thing. Whatever had started that night at the bar wasn't going to end unless they confronted it. They decided to return to the bar. It was a reckless plan, but fear had given way to determination. They had to face the terror head-on. When they arrived, the bar was empty, the air thick with an oppressive silence. The lights flickered as they stepped inside. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if the place itself was alive. In the back room, they found surveillance equipment, cameras hidden in corners, trained on the booths in the bar. The screen displayed footage from the night they were there, showing them laughing and drinking. But as the footage played, something horrifying happened. The man at the bar was there, but he wasn't alone. A shadowy figure stood behind each of them in the footage. The figure's face was a blank void, and its hands rested on their shoulders. As the recording continued, the figures leaned in, whispering into their ears. Their expressions changed, smiles fading into terror. Suddenly, the door to the back room slammed shut. The friends spun around, but no one was there. A cold wind swept through the room, carrying with it a faint, guttural whisper. "I'm still watching." They ran. Panic and fear coursed through them as they burst out of the bar and into the night. But when they reached the street, they realized something chilling. Megan was gone. They called her name, searched every street and alley, but she had vanished without a trace. The police investigation led nowhere. The bar closed down a week later, and the owner disappeared. Rumors swirled, but no official explanation was ever given. Jake, Sarah, Chris, and Ethan moved on with their lives, but the memory of that night never left them. They drifted apart, each haunted in their own way. Years later, Sarah woke up to a message written on her mirror. It was the same as before. "I'm still watching." There's a certain kind of dread that creeps into your bones when you walk into a place that feels wrong. Claire didn't believe in that sort of thing. She was practical, logical. When she took a part-time job at Hargrove's Tavern, an old crumbling bar on the edge of a forgotten town, she wasn't looking for anything more than extra cash. The warnings, the strange atmosphere, They were just quirks of a rundown business, or so she thought. Her first night at the tavern started like any other bartending job, pouring drinks, wiping counters, and listening to drunken ramblings. Mr. Hargrove, a wiry, pale man with sunken eyes, gave her a tour. His instructions were standard until they reached a door behind the bar. It was sturdy, wooden, and stained with age. He stopped her with a firm hand. "Don't go near this door," he said. His voice was sharp, final. "No one goes down there. No one." Claire chuckled, thinking it was some kind of joke. "What's down there?" "Nothing you need to worry about," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "Just do your job and stay out of the basement." The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine, but she shrugged it off. A locked basement wasn't her problem. Over the next few weeks, Claire settled into her routine. She became familiar with the regulars, quiet, tired men who seemed to carry the weight of old secrets. The tavern creaked with every gust of wind. The floorboards groaned under her feet, and the dim lights flickered unpredictably. She told herself it was just the age of the building. Then, one stormy night, she heard it. A knock. It was faint, rhythmic, and coming from the floor beneath her feet. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The knock grew louder, persistent, as if someone, or something, was trying to get her attention. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer. The knocking stopped. Claire shook her head, forcing a laugh. "It's just the storm," she muttered. But deep down, she wasn't so sure. The next evening, a group of patrons huddled in a corner, speaking in hushed tones. Their eyes darted toward the bar, then back to one another. Claire caught fragments of their conversation. Fluided. A similar effect is found across different psychotropic agents and various foods in high-stress climates. Another one is to carry more weight, up to 50 times. You can far more weight, up to 50 times. Stormy night just like before. It at that basement. She approached them curious. "Is everything all right?" The men exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, leaned in. "Best not to ask questions, miss. Just mind your business and don't stay after closing." "Some places are meant to be left alone," he said. "You don't want to know what's down there." His words gnawed at her curiosity. What was everyone so afraid of? The storm returned with a vengeance one night as Claire closed the tavern alone. Thunder rumbled, shaking the walls, and rain pelted the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. She locked the front door and began tidying up when the knocking started again. It was louder this time, insistent. Her breath quickened as she approached the door behind the bar. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle, but she stopped. Mr. Hargrove's warning echoed in her mind. No one goes down there, no one. But fear and curiosity are a dangerous mix. She pushed aside a loose panel near the door and discovered a hidden latch. With a deep breath, she pulled it. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. The air was thick with the stench of mildew and something metallic, like blood. Claire hesitated, her phone's flashlight cutting a feeble path through the shadows. Each step groaned under her weight, and the walls felt alive, as if they were breathing. At the bottom, she found a room. The walls were covered in strange symbols carved into the wood, symbols that seemed to writhe and twist when she looked at them too long. Chains hung from the ceiling, and rusted manacles lay on the floor. Torn clothing and personal belongings were scattered about, items that didn't belong to anyone she knew. In the center of the room was a blood-stained chair. A shiver raced down her spine as she spotted a journal lying open on a rotting table. She picked it up, her hands shaking, and read the words scrawled in frantic handwriting. The storm calls them. It feeds on fear. The basement is the mouth, and we are its prey. I hear them knocking. They never stop. They never stop. Suddenly, the hidden door above slammed shut. Claire's heart leapt into her throat. She spun around, her flashlight flickering. Footsteps echoed above her, heavy, deliberate steps. "Mr. Hargrove?" she called out, her voice cracking. A slow, chilling laugh echoed down the staircase. "I told you not to go down there," his voice drawled. "But you didn't listen." Her pulse raced as she backed against the wall. "Why are you doing this? What is this place?" "It's not my place," he said. "I'm just the caretaker. The bar belongs to something else, something older. It hungers, and it's your turn now." The knocking resumed, more furious than ever, shaking the very walls. Shadows began to form in the corners of the room, twisted figures with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. Claire screamed as they moved toward her, their skeletal hands reaching. She scrambled to the staircase, her fingers clawing at the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out," she sobbed, pounding against the wood. "You were never meant to leave," Mr. Hargrove whispered. The storm outside roared as the figures closed in, their hollow eyes burning with malevolence. The last thing Claire saw before the darkness consumed her was the blood-stained chair, waiting for its next occupant. A week later, the tavern reopened with a new barmaid. She was young, eager, and oblivious to the whispered warnings. Mr. Hargrove gave her the same tour, the same rules, and stopped her at the door behind the bar. "Don't go near this door," he said. "No one goes down there. No one." And the storm clouds began to gather once more.